Hi guys. So one of the questions that I was asked last week on Instagram was, why did I become a physio and what makes me different than other physios? And the answer to both of those questions is the same, which is I actually started with a bachelor's in anthropology and political science, if you can believe it. And then when I graduated, I spent a year working as a pastry chef because why not? And because I had been baking since I was 8 years old and it was tons of fun, all of that. And I used that year to kind of decide what I wanted to do next. And that ended up being a master's in forensic anthropology down in Boston. And when I say forensic anthropology, I mean like actual forensic studies. If any of you have ever watched Bones, then that's what I studied. For those of you who haven't watched Bones, essentially my training was all about taking as much information as I could from an individual's skeletal remains to estimate their age, sex, ancestry, and height, as well as any other information like trauma or previous fractures or whatever, things that might help identify that person in a medical legal death investigation, and then therefore help solve the mystery of whatever happened to that person. So after I graduated from Boston and moved back to Canada, I realized that there are no jobs for forensic anthropologists in Canada. And while I had been studying forensics, I had started doing CrossFit. And I moved back to Canada, realized there were no jobs, went back to baking for a year. That was so much fun. Spent a year making cookies, milk and cookies in a milk and cookie bakery. It was so much fun. And then I started really getting into the CrossFit thing. And I ended up asking my coaches at the gym if they needed a coach or an admin or whatever, and they needed both. So switched over to coaching and running the gym that I was working in. And as I coached more and more, I was obviously able to use all that really in-depth skeletal anatomy to help me coach people and help them move better. But there were times when I realized that no matter what cue I gave them, they just weren't able to move in an optimal pattern. And I didn't like that I couldn't figure out how to correct their imbalances with other exercises. It was obvious that those people needed exercises, unilateral exercises or whatever, to try and correct the movement, as opposed to just giving them a cue and then they can correct it on the spot. And I didn't like that I couldn't do that, so I then applied to physio programs in order to actually learn how to be a better coach and bring it back to my coaching. And all through school, I continued coaching. Even as I graduated and started working as a physio, I continued coaching. And between the two, I've ended up kind of melding everything together. And while I was at school, I also did a precision nutrition certification and stuff like that. So by now, the way I approach figuring out what is going on with someone, like why they have pain or why they're moving a certain way, there's the forensic aspect that comes in, where I've had a lot of patients sit there and they say like, man, I feel like this is a mystery. I feel like you're solving a mystery. And for me, that's kind of what's happening. In my head, I am recreating the issue to then try and figure out what could be wrong. I'm taking their various symptoms and what movements create more pain, or whether it's a constant pain or what have you. And I'm taking all of the indicators, asking a million questions, taking all of those indicators to come up with a picture in my mind, and then I start testing it, because science. So I start testing my theory, and then that helps guide me towards sort of my conclusion. And then from there, I actually will physically work on the person. I'll use my hands most often as opposed to dry needling or what have you, but I use my hands to work out any muscle tension or whatever to try and get that person to a position where they can move as optimally as possible. And then I give them exercises to maintain that position and strengthen that position, as well as throughout the range that they have. And with that, I'm also talking to them about their recovery and their nutrition and how they're training and their programming and all that kind of stuff. So I'm starting with a forensics base to figure out what the issue is, and then to really address the issue, I'm not just treating that. I bring in the coaching side of things. I might work on mindset. I might work on that person's nutrition or their sleep patterns, or maybe suggest that they work in more meditation or more sort of me time or whatever to really create a more holistic approach to treating whatever their pain is. Because more often than we care to admit, pain is a symptom of either it could just be a structural issue going on, like there's a muscle that's a bit irritated or whatever, or it's a symptom of a much larger issue in that person's training program or lack of recovery or what have you. So ultimately, where I came from is exactly what informs how I treat. And how I treat is not just a direct line of what's your pain, let's fix it. It's let's look for the root cause of your pain and fix that. And then we go from there. So that's me in a nutshell as a physio. Have a good day. Bye.